You're very welcome back to the show. Now in Ireland, we're starting families much older than previous generations, and this trend looks set to continue. Now, 1 in 6 couples will experience difficulty conceiving, and with so much misinformation out there, we decided to get expert advice. So, Dr. Larisa Cordy, you're very welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming all the way over from the far, far away UK today.
Thank you so much. It's my first time in Ireland and Dublin.
And you're loving it?
Excited. Well, all I've seen is the airport so far
and
the
here.
motorway. And here. So I love it so far, yeah.
Now, I have to say, fertility is one of those things. I suppose people are having kids later and later.
Yeah.
And people are more conscious of, I suppose years ago, if you didn't have children, oh, it just wasn't meant to be. But there's little things that can affect your fertility, not necessarily big things. Like, what are the main factors that affect people's fertility?
Yeah, so much. So, yeah, you're absolutely right that, you know, biologically speaking, nothing's really changed. But socially speaking, so much has changed for both men and women, and they are leaving childbearing to a much later age. And you're right that, you know, people tend to think, oh, it's massive things that are affecting my ability to get pregnant. But actually, it's a combination quite often of a lot of small things. So the biggest thing that I tend to see quite a lot of is people not necessarily having a good lifestyle in the long run that helps them towards conceiving, especially if they're leaving it later. So not eating properly, not looking after their fitness, not looking after their general state of health and paying attention to that. So what most people don't realise is that the groundwork for having babies should start really early in your life, actually. And of course, so many of us spend most of our sex education, if we have that, thinking that we shouldn't get pregnant and we should do the exact opposite and stay on the pill for ages and use all these methods of contraception to not get pregnant. So, of course, when you face that situation later in life where you desperately want to have a baby but it's not happening, it feels incredibly harrowing because it just feels as if you've been misinformed your entire life.
Yeah, and I suppose there's so much scaremongering as well. I mean, if you're having a baby, you need to grow a human being in your body.
Right,
your body needs to be fit. Your mind needs to be healthy because your body isn't going to accept, even if you are so-called overt fertility problems.
Right.
So how important are things like stress and being calm, which I know is very difficult if you're desperate for a child, but how important are things like that when it comes to conceiving?
Yeah, really, really important. I mean, I did a lot of my research in stress, actually, and the effect that it has on fertility. And it was really, really difficult to prove categorically that it's stress per se or stress alone that has these negative effects. You know, research is showing that there definitely is an effect. And, you know, if you think about it, if you are stressed, even just with little things that accumulate over time, what happens is that the level of stress hormone rises, so cortisol levels rise. You're in this state of your sympathetic nervous system, which is essentially what's activated here, is on the rise, and it becomes very defensive. And so you're in this state where you're trying to kind of, you know, in the past when the sympathetic nervous system was initially developed for animals, you know, you're trying to... Right, exactly. You're trying to defend yourself from potential predators. And so the last thing, if you think about it, you're going to want to do is to conceive. And that's exactly what your body's doing. It's acting in your best interest, in your defense, and not trying to get you pregnant. So stress is a massive one, and it's exactly because of all these factors and the fact that, you know, people aren't aware of it, that I've actually created a whole website dedicated to this. So it's about how to follow a really good fertility lifestyle that's going to be helpful and useful to you, really good tips and practical advice that you can have. And I launched that yesterday, actually.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you so much. Yeah, I really hope people benefit from it, and, you know, everyone in Ireland gets to see it too. I think the link is on your show notes.
DrLarisaCordy.com, because I think I know within my own family we've had, there's 10 of us. My mother clearly didn't have any fertility issues, but within my own family there is as well. And I think a lot of time people tend to go straight for, I have these issues, IVF. And that's, you're pumping so much hormones into your body to get your eggs ready, your womb ready, everything else like that. Whereas sometimes you put so much pressure on yourself and your partner, guys. I don't know what two of you have kids, but feeling the pressure if there's a pregnancy badly wanted. I mean, my poor brother-in-law ran to my mother and told me, take your daughter away from me. She's stressing my head out. Because if you're not enjoying each other's company, and if sex becomes a very stressful I'm ovulating, let's do a thing. It can't be healthy either.
Oh, God, completely not. And you know, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, guys, that, you know, with stress, sex can become really militaristic. It becomes like this operation you've got to do to have a baby. When am I ovulating? You know, I had a patient whose husband actually had an app on his phone that went off in the middle of his meetings to tell him when his wife was ovulating.
Oh, my
so he'd come back and, yeah, you know, people really do take it to the nth degree, and it becomes quite obsessive. And, you know, whereas yes, it's important to be aware of your fertile window when you know, you should ideally have sex and time, especially if you're limited, because so many couples now spend time apart and it's really difficult to be together. What new research is showing is that having frequent sex, so one of the myths we used to think about was, you know, storing sperm because they'd be
saved
better.
all up for
Saving
the,
all up for the big
rainy day or whatever.
Let it rain.
But what we now know is actually that's completely erroneous and not true. And actually having frequent sex is far better for the sperm and also far better for women too, because it helps to build their immunity. Getting ready for pregnancy, and immunity is a really massive thing if you want to get pregnant. So having more regular sex, being aroused more often, orgasming if you can, although it's not
yes,
an absolute necessity.
Got it.
Yeah.
Really
Take
got
note,
it.
really important. Is actually really important.
If you want, that's how people normally get pregnant. Have a lot of sex.
Yeah.
Have more sex.
Yeah,
Have more,
I know.
and it can be as simple as
Well,
that. Because
right,
if there's an egg there somewhere and a sperm there somewhere, the basics of it, they'll meet at some point.
Right.
The odds go up.
It seems so basic, but yet I think we can completely overcomplicate it. And, you know, I don't know how you guys feel about the whole issue, because there's so much pressure on men as well. And I think they're the really neglected part of fertility, aren't they? Where so often, even when I see couples, you know, the men quite often just sit there and feel as if all they're doing is just contributing sperm, but not necessarily having an active role. Whereas actually, men can do so much like women. Again, you know, if you follow all the tips with fertility lifestyle,
So what can men do to make themselves more fertile?
Loads of things. So watching what they eat in their diet, eating as cleanly and organically as possible. So making sure that the food isn't contaminated with chemicals and pesticides and other hormones that can interfere. Keeping fit, exercising often, keeping your weight to a normal limit. Again, reducing stress, really important.
That's all stuff that is just part of a normal life, if that's the way you want to live your life, just by eating healthily and working out and, you know, being in good nick, I suppose.
What about the myths if you wear tight underpants, you'll affect yourself and temperature and all that, because that's what I hear. I don't know. What about things like that?
Well, there is some truth to that. We generally, as specialists, recommend that women do wear looser fitting boxer shorts because generally it keeps the sperm and the testicles cooler. And
they're outside the body for a reason, basically.
Exactly right. So that's what we want to kind of replicate here, that we want to keep them cooler, which is why we don't recommend hot baths either, and saunas and steam rooms, and also driving for long periods of time, which can increase the heat around there. So there is some truth in that. And also the fact that a lot of conceptions occur in winter. If you've noticed, there's loads of September babies.
I'm August myself, actually.
I'm a September baby, I'm very proud to say. And the thing about that, if you trace it back to 9 months before, which is, of course, New Year and Christmas, is, OK, yes, people are out a lot more and having more sex, but also we think that because there's cooler temperatures outside, the sperm do better in terms of reaching the egg and fertilising.
And I suppose when it comes to male infertility particularly, or anything to do, like we've talked about this on the show loads of times, anything to do with men and their masculinity and anything like that, it's really very much seen as a taboo. Whatever. And I think when it comes to the whole responsibility of getting tested, women tend to do it first. If a woman comes back and goes, well, there's no problem with me, love, then the actual idea of, oh, is my sperm not working? Can I ask you guys, do you think, is it something that would you and your friends ever have talked about or ever have addressed, or is it still kind of a taboo subject?
Well, we were probably, excuse me, we were probably first out of the gates in that in my group, so we completely took for granted how easy it is, or sorry, how hard it can be for some people. We were very lucky; it all happened when we wanted it to happen. But it's only now further on when some of my friends are really struggling, and it's funny, not funny. It's interesting that you talk about stress as being so important, because we've got two sets of friends and who went through the IVF, and one person was told at the end of it, it's probably not going to happen now at this stage. But as soon as the search stopped, they fell pregnant. And another couple who started the IVF treatment, it was at that point the stress left them and they fell pregnant before they even had the treatment done. But we completely took it for granted. But it's very macho, as we've said before. Like, I'd be joking, 100% record, slept with her twice, 2 babies, that's it, we're done now, you know. And you kind of just ignore it. You don't want to get into the finer details of what's going on down below, and you certainly don't talk to your friends about it. I won't ever.
I've spoke to my friends about it, like friends who would have had difficulty in the past, and they've gone for IVF, and some of the things that he had to go through to try and increase his sperm count, and then there was invasive surgery to collect sperm from him, which had him like sitting with ice packs and stitches for a while.
What?
So But if it's something that you and your
you're desperate
partner...
and you're willing to do it. Like, I mean, it sounds horrific. You'll do anything at that point.
That is severe. Like, the most severe that we ever went through was, like, my wife put me on a diet of Brazil nuts. Because that can
Which are really good, by the way.
Really?
Selenium,
I should see everyone running into, like, Holland and Barrett, grabbing all the Brazil nuts and
I thought the Brazil nuts were radioactive for some reason.
It might taste like that.
It can set off a Geiger counter Brazil nuts, can, if there's enough, if you have enough of them. Yeah, that's another random fact.
Super babies.
Yay! There you go. But there is that taboo, and I suppose if the couple is getting tested, that's fine. But as Dara was saying there, and I'm actually a load of people I know, because I'm in my 40s, and I've a lot of my friends would have started their families later and later, and they've tried the IVF. The IVF didn't work for whatever reason, and then the IVF did work, and then a year later they've got 3 babies on the age of 2 or something like that, because a lot of it can be, I think we cannot underestimate the pressure that people put on themselves and the stress.
I think if I ever wanted to have kids, I would love to go down the surrogacy route, and like that, I would go through every test possible to see if myself or my partner, who would have the more stronger sperm, and to make sure everything was in good nick and you know, safe. Because, like you say, it is taboo, but it doesn't need to be anymore. We need to make sure that we're in good health and in good nick, and making sure what's best for what could be your child.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a reason that? Is it just because people are getting older and older and older? I know a friend of mine in the States recently froze her eggs.
Becoming really common.
I'm conflicted about freezing eggs, because I believe it's better to actually freeze embryos than freezing an egg.
You're right, yes.
It's not banking, it's not like a safeguard if you're in your 20s, you freeze your eggs, I can have a baby at 50, really, is it?
Yeah, so we always counsel patients like that. We make sure that they are aware that it absolutely isn't a guarantee that they will have children later in life, because you're right, the embryos are stronger because they're composed of more cells, so they're safer in terms of freezing and thawing later. But if the woman is younger and wishes to preserve eggs, and she's able to preserve quite a lot of them, it does give her quite a good chance, and we've got good figures on that.
Really?
Yes.
What's the most recent research on that?
Well, there's a couple of new studies showing that, because egg freezing is fairly new at the moment, but it is becoming more common. But we generally recommend that women do it before the age of 36 if they can, just because
the fertility dives off a cliff at 35.
This is the thing.
You're a geriatric pregnant person after that.
You know, I hate this term, geriatric pregnancy. I was discussing this with a maker. Well, it's so terribly degrading. And I mean, you know, that means that the majority of pregnancies now, because, you know, I did labour ward before, and the majority of women giving birth were now in their 30s. And the fastest growing group of women where fertility is on the rise is the over 40s. The majority of my patients are over 40, so to call them all geriatric is terribly degrading and completely not true. You know, women are making these choices sometimes for a reason, and I think we need to respect that instead of judging them. And
I think if I got pregnant in the morning calling myself a geriatric pregnant person, I just think would be gas. But that's my sixth sense of humour there. Now, we've had a viewer contact us, and I suppose this is one thing. We don't like to talk about being an issue when it comes to getting pregnant, but being overweight and obese hugely affects your fertility rates, as it affects your cancer rates, as it affects everything else. It's not PC to talk about it, but if you want to conceive, that's probably something you should be looking at.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, this is a subject we actually covered on This Morning in the UK yesterday, talking about weight and how important it is. And I don't like to say, but I have to say it is vital.
About it.
Completely. And I think, you know, if your BMI is over 25 or 30 in particular, for both men and women, then that has been shown over and over again to increase your chance or reduce your chance of being able to get pregnant, and also increases miscarriage rates. So the good news is that there's loads of stuff you can do. Again, you know, check out my website for the tips, because we can't go into it all here. But, you know, there's a load of stuff in terms of how you can eat, exercises that you can do to help yourself. But also, you know, another big thing is detoxing before fertility, especially at this time of year. You know, it's really, really popular. And it's something I actually agree with, because we all carry so many toxins. I think I read a figure the other day that the average woman carries over 150 toxins on her body every time she leaves the house. And that's obviously a combination of all sorts of things, some of which we can't control.
Chemicals we rub, creams into our faces, our hands,
But those are things we actually can control. So what we use in our homes, cleaning products, beauty products, what we eat, what we consume, you know, that all starts to affect our hormones and has a direct bearing.
And not only does it have a direct bearing on getting pregnant and maintaining your pregnancy, giving birth, if you are obese. I mean, the complications
really
in actually giving birth are way more magnified.
Yes, especially did. And, you know, if you are an older lady giving birth and you are overweight, then all of those complications become even bigger potentially. So losing weight will absolutely help you. And those women who also have irregular periods, as I believe the viewer was describing as well, that will help.
Yeah. Oh, Larisa, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And of course, your website, once again, for any information you need, free for everybody to look at on the website.
Yes.
That's drlarisacorded.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
And
enjoy your time in Dublin.
Yes, I will. Thank you.